In the early hours of January 3rd, 2026, the world woke to the unthinkable. Explosions over Caracas, U.S. forces deep inside Venezuelan territory, and President Nicolás Maduro, the man who had governed Venezuela for more than a decade, in U.S. custody. What led to this moment? Why did the United States, the hemisphere's dominant power, take military action against another sovereign nation? And what does this mean for oil markets, global alliances, and the future of Latin America? Venezuela once stood as one of Latin America's wealthiest nations, not because it cultivated rare minerals or high-tech industries, but because it sits atop the largest proven oil reserves on the planet. For decades, the world's petromarkets revolved around Venezuela's black gold. But the relationship between Washington and Caracas, like oil itself, was never smooth. In the late 20th century, the U.S. and Venezuela maintained a transactional political relationship. Oil flowed south to north, and American capital flowed back into Venezuelan infrastructure. But that changed sharply after Hugo Chávez, a fiery socialist and avowed critic of Washington, took power in 1999. Chávez rejected neoliberal orthodoxy. He allied Venezuela with Cuba, China, and later Russia, exporting not just oil, but an ideology that set him squarely at odds with U.S. policies in Latin America. When Nicolás Maduro succeeded Chávez in 2013, the divide only deepened, with Venezuela's economy collapsing while political freedoms eroded and migration waves rippled across the region. Sanctions became a staple of U.S. strategy, especially under President Donald Trump's first term, with crippling restrictions on Venezuela's state oil company, PDVSA, and other economic levers designed to squeeze Maduro's grip on power. By 2024, amid hyperinflation and contested elections labeled fraudulent by international observers, Venezuela stood isolated, impoverished, and in Washington's crosshairs. Starting in late 2025, the U.S. escalated. The Trump administration began striking maritime targets near Venezuela, claiming they were linked to narcotics trafficking, actions that reportedly killed over 100 people and hinted at a broader campaign. By December 2025, American warships, including the USS Gerald R. Ford, were stationed off Venezuela's coast, the largest U.S. naval presence in the Caribbean in decades. Trump declared a blockade, restricting oil exports and tightening the screws on Caracas's economy. To critics, this was not about drugs at all, but about energy and geopolitical leverage in a world where oil remained king. Venezuela's reserves, once the backbone of its national identity, had become the object of strategic obsession. In the pre-dawn hours of January 3rd, U.S. aircraft struck multiple targets on Venezuelan soil, from military bases to logistics hubs. Within hours, elite American forces had raided Nicolás Maduro's compound, seizing him and his wife, Celia Flores, and transporting them out of the country. President Trump hailed it as a decisive blow against narco-terrorism and corruption, and even suggested that the U.S. would temporarily run Venezuela until a transition could be arranged. But to many around the globe, it looked very different. Across Latin America and beyond, world leaders condemned the assault as a violation of international law and a dangerous precedent. Brazil's president called the strike unacceptable, while China's foreign ministry decried it as a blatant use of force against a sovereign nation. Countries such as Russia, Iran, and Mexico joined the chorus of criticism, warning that such unilateral intervention undermines the United Nations Charter and the principle of national sovereignty. Some nations, like Argentina under Javier Milei, cheered, seeing Maduro's downfall as a blow against socialism in the hemisphere. But for many, the scars of a superpower's boots on foreign soil will not soon fade. Oil has always underpinned Venezuela's importance and its vulnerability. With global energy markets still reeling from recent wars, climate transitions, and shifting alliances, control of petroleum resources remains a geopolitical imperative. Analysts argue the U.S. saw Venezuela's dormant energy potential not just as a prize, but as a strategic counterweight to Russian and Chinese influence in the region. Russia, a longtime ally of Caracas, now faces a stark choice: condemn the move publicly while reassessing the fragility of its own alliances. At the same time, critics see a darker pattern, one that echoes imperial interventions of the past, where powerful nations enforce their will under the guise of security or democracy promotion. Venezuela's future is uncertain, its people battered by years of crisis, its government in disarray, and its sovereignty challenged on the world stage. In Washington, political divisions over the legality and wisdom of the strike are deepening. Some hail it as a necessary action against tyranny. Others warn it may spark decades of instability. One thing is clear: the capture of Nicolás Maduro was not the end of a conflict, but the beginning of a new chapter in a fractured world, where oil, power, and rival visions of global order collide with unprecedented force. This is not just a story of two nations. It is a chapter in the unfolding struggle over how global power will be defined in the 21st century.